Good evening to you one and all, and welcome to yet another race, Western Province Sports and GT Masters Division. Tonight we're coming to you from Phillip Island. It's race number 8 of season number 7. So joining me as always, the man that's going to be live at Killarney International on Friday and Saturday, the voice of West Province Motorsport, Frankie Yenis. Frankie, good evening to you.
Gaza, good evening and hello to everybody else at home. Yes, we come to you tonight from Phillip Island in Australia in the city of Cowes. The track is 4.41 kilometers long, 42 degrees is track temperature. Outside temperature is only 18 degrees Celsius, partly cloudy, 3% of rain, 3k an hour wind, and we are 48 meters above sea level.
Well, I think that the guys are already out on the circuit. Let's have a look, see exactly who is going to be out there. Well, the man you see on screen, that is in fact Johan Fourie. He's leading the championship title race at this stage of the fight. He's got 389 points. And, well, I can't see that anybody's going to possibly be able to catch him from there with only 2 races to go. Francois Botha is, or should I say, that should be Francois Hubert, actually, is the man that is lying a second overall in the championship. And as we went live, I did not see him on a screen at all. I see Peter Hubert. That is the only of the Huberts that I see out there. So Willem Botha is the next man that then is in line for the championship battle. He's got 327 points. And then 4th overall in the championship is in fact Peter Hubert. Now, Frankie, Peter Hubert has had his best season to date, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. He's got 310 points. And that fight for second and third, there's one more round left after this one, remember. We'll be doing LMP2 cars at Le Mans. And that will be the final one for 2022. And that's next week, Wednesday. And that is Peter Hubert that you see out there on the circuit. And he's out there in the McLaren sports car. And then Graham Stephen. Graham out there in the Porsche, in the Gulf-colored Porsche. 3 minutes done of the 10-minute qualifying session. And that is the Gulf Porsche of Graham Stephen.
Well, Graham Stephen on 299 with Peter Hubert that we saw just before that on 310. Just 3 points short of Graham Stephen is in fact Luke Lucchese, and well, that's a slightly different color scheme for him. Another story of joy and happiness this season surely got to be this man, Ati Nagel, on 253 points, finds himself in 7th position overall in the championship race, which is quite fine, and I think that he will be pretty happy with that. Sandra Bakari, the next man on the list, is on 201 points. And as we say that, Sandra Bakari initially went to the top end of the board. But as always, that man, Frankie,
Johan Fourie.
Yep.
He's done a 134.969. And he is only 0.08 of a second ahead of Luke Lucchese. That's now dropped down to 3rd because Gerald Fourie, wow, 134.893. Gerald Fourie in the Mercedes-Benz.
Well, that's very, very close. Let's just have a look at the overall gaps that we've got there. So 75 thousandths of a second between Gerald Fourie and Johan Fourie. And Frankie, recently we've actually seen the two of them battling it out at the front end of the field.
Yeah, we have indeed, and it's going to be a battle that I believe is going to continue this evening. There's Gerald Fourie, and there's Robbie Teens, and he's a second off the pace of Gerald Fourie in that number 1 Porsche. He sits currently there in that 4th position. And then Steve McCarthy, he's 1.021 seconds off Fourie. He's McCarthy with the McLaren, busy working his way around, and he rounds off the top 5. As a matter of fact, he's just dropped down into P6.
Yep, Willem Botha pops up into the second row of the grid, and wow, Aston Martin that's in there. So quite a selection of GT4 cars that we have out there. Remember, these GT4 cars is a very popular form of motorsport worldwide. But as we know, Frankie, with the MSA series for 2023, GT3s is the top echelon in terms of sports car racing, and that's what we're going to be using for 2023 for the MSA season as such.
Yeah, these GT4 cars are awesome cars to drive, but remember, they are a lot slower than what the GT3s are, and even for that matter, the GTE cars. There is Luke Lucchesi in the Porsche. He's popped up into that third position, and he's a tenth of a second off Gerald Fourie. Johannes 700ths of a second off Gerald for that matter, but that is that lime green Porsche of Luke Lucchesi in that third position. We drop down to the man that's there in 12th position. I think that is Leonardo Bakari. Yes, 1.4 off Fourie in the McLaren.
That, in fact, is somebody that's not on the board yet, Frankie. I can see it on my screen. That's Herman Lazarus in the
should have known, cheaper cars.
But yeah, they have driven in similar colors recently. He's one of the people that have not put up a time. I see Jan Spammers is also out on circuit, but hasn't got a time yet, as well as this man, Peter van der Spey. Now, just before we went live, it was Peter van der Spey that sent a message. Power issues, we'll try and get on later. And, well, he hasn't been able to put up a time yet because he's just actually got out on circuit.
Yeah, well, that no wonder Bakari is flashing, and that was there with Lazarus. That's why I thought that it was him. So 7 minutes done, 3 minutes to go. Johan Fourie is the man that's in pits. Luke Lucchesi has gone up into second position. Gerald Fourie has dropped down to third. But the guys are busy making their way into pit lane. They are basically finished their qualifying session. Only the guys out on circuit is Stanton, Buerta, Peter Hubert, Robbie Teagues, Atti Nagel, Willem Pinaar, and then the four that you see at the bottom of your screen.
Well, I think Timothy Stanton, probably one of his very best races that he had in the last week or two, that he's been back at home after going overseas and visiting the kids, and now at the moment provisionally on the second row of the grid, and that ahead of Willem Buerta, the man that's lying third overall in the championship for the year. Timothy Stanton puts in a 1:35.167, which is not quicker than his previous lap that he did, and that completes it for him. So where does that leave Willem Buerta? Willem Buerta has slowed down. In fact, looks like he's aborted this lap that he was on, and it looks like that is where he's going to end up. Atti Nagel's still out there on circuit. There he comes across the line, and looks like he's not going to be able to go any quicker than what he did, so he'll slow it all down. Leonardo Bakari is still on a flyer. He's in 13th position. Remember, we still don't have a lap time for Jan Spammers, Herman Lazarus, and then also Peter van der Spey. Peter must be pretty close towards the end of the lap by now, and I do think that he'll be able to make it through.
Now that is the 19 car of Van der Spey. It doesn't show in that top 16, so surely you'll put a lap, a good one in there, and pop somewhere in that top 16. There's a minute and 5 seconds left before the qualifying stint is done, so let's see where Van der Spey will filter in.
So keep in mind that Jan Spammers, he is on the leaderboard, on the official leaderboard by me, but he has not done any lap times at all, so somehow he managed to get in onto the server but has not put up any times at all. There's a couple of people that said they're not going to be able to make it, and frankly, as Porsches go, that's not exactly the most amazing looking Porsche that I've ever seen in my life whatsoever.
Now look, it's not a GT3 or a GTE Porsche, but still, it's a Porsche nonetheless.
But in green.
Yeah.
It's a strange unit. That's
There's the 46, the Amiga, the Batmobile of Andre Steenkamp. 2.1 off Johan Fourie, and he finds himself in that 16th position, does Steenkamp.
So at this stage of the fight, with 8 seconds to go, everybody has completed the laps. It's only Leonardo Bakari and Andre Steenkamp that's still out on circuit, but the computer will say thanks very much for your efforts. Let's say goodbye to you, and let's show you exactly what the grid is going to look like.
Well, welcome to Phillip Island in Melbourne, and your front row will be Johan Fourie, Luke Lucchesi. Your second row, Gerald Fourie and Timothy Stanton. Your third row will be Willem Botha, Peter Hubert. Your fourth row, Robbie Ting, Steve McCarthy. And your fifth row, Sandra Bakari and Attila Achel.
Then just outside of the top 10, Willem Pinaar and Graham Stephen. From Leonardo Bakari, Herman Lazarus, Colin Pitt, Andre Steenkamp finds himself just outside of the top 15 with Ian Riddle and Peter van der Spey. And then that brings up the man at the back of the grid that has not put up a time yet, and that is Jan Spammers.
Right, 19 of them out there, and we're going to go GT4 racing from Melbourne, from Phillip Island in Australia, and 2 heats today. This is heat number 1, and we're going to go green soon. The safety car is on the grid. Only 19 starters. We'll make it 18 because Jan Spammers has not gridded yet. So 18 of them on the grid. Let's hope that Jan can get onto that grid in that 19th position.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's actually clicked in. You'll see his name's got a slightly grey colour to it. So that means that he hasn't been able to link up onto the system at all as they move off the line. A rolling start it's going to be. We've had the 15-minute practice, then we've just had now the 10-minute qualify. For those of you that have just joined us, welcome. We're at Phillip Island with the GT4s for season number 7, race number 9 for the season. And I think it's going to be, sorry, race number 8 should I say, and I think it's going to be pretty close between the guys on the front end of the grid. 2 fast repairs with the rolling start, the 17 X's for a drive-through. They're running with the sprint setup and there's no pit stops, so as they are, that's the way it's going to happen out there. There's no chance of doing, shall we call it the Johan Fourie, where you duck into the pits too early and too late, and somehow you get yourself back to the front end of the field.
Right, they've just made their way out of the southern loop. They're heading now towards Repco, and then through Repco they'll go into one of the world famous Siberia. That is Repco that they're working through now behind the safety car. Then a short straight before a hairpin to the left. That is called Siberia. And then also a very well-known name, Lucky Heights, but that is on the top left-hand side of the circuit.
So they work their way around, and anti-clockwise circuit, which is slightly dissimilar to what most of the circuits worldwide are.
Right, they're just winding their way now towards Lucky Heights. That's that right-hander. And there, Lucky Heights comes into your shot as the safety car leads them into Lucky Heights. Then there's a very tricky right hairpin known as MG, and that is coming out of Lucky Heights. You climb up Lucky Heights, it's a blind off-camber Lucky Heights, and then drop slightly down into that hairpin known as MG, and then left again towards turn 11. There's the pit lane on the left hand side. Safety car peels in. They're making their way through turn 11, sorry, and it is Fourie and Lucchesi that set the pace out of that long left-hander under the Melbourne Bridge. Hello everybody, welcome to Phillip Island, and here we go. As they drop the hammers, we go green, 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 and it is Johan Fourie from Luke Lucchesi, from Gerald Fourie in that first, second and third position. And Bottas having a look up on the inside of Robbie Teings, and he makes the move strictly on Robbie Teings, and right behind Robbie Teings is Peter Hubert.
Yep, Peter Hubert right in there as well. Peter Hubert and Robbie Teings, Sandra Bakari very close to one another. But look at that battle up front. Nothing much between the front three. And, well, I think that they are already in a situation where they realize if anybody gets away at the front end of the pack, you're not going to catch them very easily on this specific circuit.
Well, it's side by side. Oh, and Fourie goes wide, and he might lose 2 positions there. He gets nudged out the way by Fourie, and it's Luke Lucchesi. Luke Lucchesi, Gerald Fourie, Johan Fourie in that third position, followed there by Willem Botha. As a matter of fact, Timothy Stanton has got his nose ahead of Peter Hubert as well, but it's a four-way fight up front. We're going to have a look at the intervals now as Botha puts an Aston Martin on the dirt as he sits there in that fourth position behind Johan Fourie.
So the front four having made a little bit of a breakaway from the rest of the pack, but nothing much in it at this stage of the fight. Let's go from the top down. Gerald Fourie ahead of Luc Lucchesi. So Gerald Fourie, let's have a look at that passing maneuver. I think that was a brilliant little piece of driving there. He puts himself in the right position. A little bit of a nudge from behind. And whoopsie, Johan Fourie's not having it all his own way right now.
Right, Gerald Fourie will have the intervals now. That's the gap between first and last. I'll ask Gary to put up the intervals. Then you can see there, look at that, all of them, the first 13 cars. There's nothing much between them. Johan Fourie sits on the case there of Botha. We go a bit further down. That's that fight in that mid-pack. That is Sandro Bakari. They're all around Sandro Bakari. As a matter of fact, Luc Lucchesi is dropping down. Luc Lucchesi, that was the leader, has dropped all the way down to P15. And there is troubles for Lucchesi. He sits in that 16th position now. So something went horribly wrong for Lucchesi.
Oh, it looks like Andre Steenkamp that went off onto the inside of the track, then went off onto the outside of the track. And look at that. Oh, very well handled, I must say. But just look how long it takes to get back to the circuit for ever and ever. And Peter van der Spey getting himself back on circuit as well. So Luc Lucchesi, as you said, did go off track. That was Luc Lucchesi recovery to get back onto the circuit again. Let's see where he originally went off circuit. Here we go. There's Luc Lucchesi, and oh, he's just a little bit too hard.
Yeah, too hard, then overdoes it, then goes from the left-hand side across to the right-hand side, through the sand pit he goes, tries to rescue that car. I would have kept it on the grass and driven around if I was him, but he tried to bring it back through the sand pit, and that's why he finds himself in that 16th position. However, it's the Mercedes-Benz outfit that sits first, second and third. Gerald Fourie, he's 2.1 seconds ahead of Johan Fourie, who is 1.3 seconds ahead of Timothy Stanton in that third position. Then he's got the two McLarens behind him of Peter Hubert and Sandro Bakari.
Yep, Sandro Bakari not that far out of it at this stage. Oh, somebody's just gone flying off the circuit. Let's see if we can try and pick up a replay of that for you. I think that's
Stanton.
Was that Timothy Stanton?
Yes.
Yep, I think it was Timothy Stanton that had off track. Let's just see if we can pick it up. Oh, yeah, that's the second car in the exact same area. But he went and touched it up against the barrier, and there was nowhere for him to go from there. And then into the sand trap. Looks like he might have lost connectivity. Because, I mean, frankly, he didn't slow down. He didn't go faster. He didn't go slower. He went the proverbial straight.
Straight on through the Kittelette into the tyre barrier. Atinagel sits there in that 7th position. He, together with Willem Pinaar, is hunting down that 6th position of Graham Stephen. This is a replay of the McLaren of Leonardo Bakari. Just getting the tail stepping out as he put a couple of wheels there on the dirt.
Oh, that's a neat way to get a little bit of attention, and he gets it all together. Robbie Teens, the comeback kid, he's on his way down to Killarney International for Friday and Saturday for the 9 hour, and looks like he got it just a little bit onto the loose. And yeah, he gets it going again, but that did cost him pretty heavily. Going back to the front end of the field, remember, it's only a 25-minute race. So Gerald Fourie leads out at the front. And once again, Frankie, we see the likes of Atinagel and Gerald Fourie and Peter Hubert recently now. Stephen McCarthy as well starting to come up to the top end of the field, and in fact we've seen Graham Stephen coming into play recently as well.
This whole gaggle of cars going through the southern loop, working their way towards Repco as Graham Stephen. There you see the Gulf color car of Graham Stephen. They are racked and stacked and packed. There's about 6 of them in there behind Graham Stephen. Atinagel wants to have a look on the outside. Stephen defends the inside line. Nagel will try and drive around him on the outside, but Stephen has got that line. Willem Pinaar is a 10th of a second in the Porsche behind Atinagel. That's a front left-hand side suspension of the Atinachel McLaren, as he's 5/10 of a second behind the Porsche ahead of him in the hands of Graham Stephen.
Well, the next problem is directly behind that in Arkel. In fact, as you said, that's Willem Pienaar. And behind Willem Pienaar is a Colin Plitt having a pretty good run with that multicolored motor car. Behind that, the blue car you can see is Herman Lazarus. And then under the recovering Luc Lucchesi comes through behind that.
Followed there 600ths of a second by Willem Botha, has now made the move on Lucchesi. So Willem Botha has made the passing maneuver there on Luc Lucchesi. Up on the inside goes the Aston Martin. Lucchesi on the outside, Botha on the inside, and slides ahead of Lucchesi. And Lucchesi has retaken that 10th position back from Willem Botha.
Well, he wasn't taking that one sitting down at all. There they come into the next corner. Luc Lucchesi saying, thanks, very nice. Let me take this green mean machine of mine and put it in front of you. And that in behind Timothy... Not Timothy Stanton, that's Herman Lazarus. Yeah, that was Herman Lazarus. That was in that one. So Herman Lazarus right in the middle of the pack. So from the top down, we're looking at the likes of Gerald Fourie that's doing a brilliant job. Look at that, Gerald Fourie, and he's got a 3-second gap from that man, Johan Fourie. He's had a bit of difficulties so far. Then it's Peter Hubert that's looking pretty decent. After that, it's Stephen McCarthy. Then that whole gaggle of cars, Frankie, and that read out there by Graham Stephen.
Yeah, Graham Stephen has got them all racked and stacked. Atinachel, Willem Pienaar, Colin Plitt, Luc Lucchesi, Willem Botha, and Herman Lazarus. They're all in there from P11 up to P6, fighting for P5. There is Atinachel. Atinachel sitting out there with that McLaren. He's got the Castrol Porsche of Willem Pienaar, 3/10 of a second behind him. And then there's a lovely war behind them. And through goes Luc Lucchesi and Willem Pienaar on Colin Plitt. And right behind Colin Plitt is Herman Lazarus.
It looks like Herman Lazarus was about to have a look up on the inside line and then eventually backed out of that once Herman Lazarus killed to within a second as we look back from the Atinachel car. But let's have a look back one car further back, Willem Pienaar. That's the amount of space that he's managed to get for himself. Looking back from Luc Lucchesi to Willem Botha, 0.2 of a second. Two Porsches, both of them in very strange colors.
Well, it's a lovely fight there. Luc Lucchesi is sitting out there in P8. Oh, right on his exhaust system there is the Willem Botha Aston Martin. And Peter Hubert has dropped all the way down to P9. Timothy Stanton in the pits. Peter Hubert has dropped down to that 9th position.
Yeah, Timothy Stanton off into the pits, so that drops him a long, long way down. He was doing pretty decent up until that stage of the fight. As we look back from Luc Lucchesi through to Willem Botha and Herman Lazarus. But don't forget about the man at the front end of the field. That's what he looks like. And, well, he's just so far ahead of everybody else. Look at that. You can't even see unless you pan a long way back. You pick up Johan Fourie. That's 4 seconds further back. And then even further back after Johan Fourie, that was, Graham Stephen. And then I think Graham Stephen has now got them racked, packed, and stacked behind him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars, all of them line astern.
Well, that's why Peter Hubert dropped all the way down. He is in the pit area. He currently shows in that 17th position. But yes, Graham Stevens sits there and he's a second ahead of Atinachel. And right behind him is that lime-colored Porsche of Luc Lucchesi. Down the main straight they go. Into that slight right-hander, which will take them towards the southern loop. And Lucchesi is going to come through. Lucchesi comes through. Luc Lucchesi has made the move there on Atinachel.
Yeah, so he's definitely making his way through the pecking order, but that's the way that we're accustomed to seeing it happening. It's a pity that Timothy Stanton picked up a problem. We saw that he went into the pits, but we didn't see exactly what happened to Timothy Stanton unless that was a continuous damage that had been collected on that motor car that created that scenario. But if you look back, well, I tell you what, that whole queue's racked, packed and stacked behind him.
Graham Stephen, what does he do? Because here comes Luc Lucchesi, just under a second, 8/10 of a second between Stephen and Lucchesi as we ride aboard the cockpit cam. of the number 2 car in P4, namely Graham Stephen. And Graham Stephen is 3.5 seconds behind Stephen McCarthy. What a lovely drive Stephen is having. That is that blind rise, that is Lookie Heights, and now he's making his way through MG, then into the left-hander, that is turn 10, and then turn 11 will be coming up with the pit lane there on his left-hand side.
So that gap between Graham Stephen and Stephen McCarthy, that is 3.1 seconds. That's what it looks like from his motor car. But Luke Lucchese, that's what Luke Lucchese see. And that car directly in front of him is in fact the man we were just driving on board with as he works his way through that long right-hander. Literally, that's turn number 1. It's known as turn number 1 as he works his way down towards the southern loop. Look how he goes through the gearbox, 2 years down, and Luke Lucchese is on the move.
Luke Lucchese is one to that 4th position from Graham Stephen, just down the road ahead of Graham Stephen. You see going into that left-hander is Stephen McCarthy. This is the view from Willem Botha as he has a look at Graham Stephen, and now gets overtaken there by Luke Lucchese. And Lucchese goes up into P4, and Botha is going to make the move as well. Yes, Botha. No, Stephen fights back. The two of them are virtually side by side.
Well, nothing much between the two of them. Timothy Stanton still in the pits. Now they are not virtually side by side. They are still side by side. Somebody's got to yield. Who's it going to be? It's not going to be Graham Stephen. It's not going to be Graham Stephen. It's not going to be Willem Botha. And eventually, Willem Botha gets one over Graham Stephen, and that drops him out of the top 5.
This is going to bring Atti Nagel into play. There you see Atti Nagel. Just behind Atti Nagel, you see Willem Pina. He's a second behind Atti Nagel in that Castrol Porsche. Is Pina sitting there in that 8th position. And then the blue car you see in your shot there, 2.2 seconds behind Pina, is the McLaren of Herman Lazarus.
So the fight is on. It's Graham Stephen on Willem Botha, but he's got to keep a look in the rearview mirror, because that's what's looming up behind him. Graham Stephen trying to hold out the likes of Atti Nagel. Now remember, Atti Nagel is having his best season to date. He's on 253 points, and he finds himself in 6th position overall in the championship. Does Graham Stephen, and Atti Nagel, I think, will be pretty chuffed with the opportunity to have a solid go at him.
Well, making their way out to the southern loop, it's that long left-handed sweep that goes to turn 3 towards turn 4. That is Repco, and there is Atti Nagel. Nagel is a second behind Graham Stephen. That's 78 McLaren, who's all over the back there of Graham Stephen. Just ahead of Graham Stephen, 0.4 of a second, you see Willem Botha. There is the McLaren of iRacing South Africa, car 78 in P7, Atti Nagel. There is a replay of Colin Plitt in the Momo Porsche. What did he do wrong? On the dirt, yeah, on the grass. Slicks on grass don't work, and he does a semi-swapper there on him.
Andre Steenkamp decided to just check if there's maybe a bit more grip out there. Realized, no. Let's revert to plan A and put it back on the track again.
Yeah, that is the 46 car. We go back to car number 78 in P7. The McLaren of Atti Nagel is a second behind Graham Stephen, who's 0.8 of a second behind Willem Botha. There is Herman Lazarus, and he's fighting there with Sander Bakari. That's the two McLarens of Lazarus and Bakari, and they're having their own little fight for Herman's 8th position. As you see the two McLarens, and 3 seconds behind them is the Porsche of Willem Pinaar in P11.
Yeah, Willem Pinaar's doing a pretty decent job. Andre Steenkamp finds himself a long way down from where he would like to be. He has had 1 or 2 times that he's tested the grass for grip and realized there ain't much out there. He finds himself a little distance, not that far, behind Leonardo Bakari. We're 15 minutes into this 25-minute race. They're pretty spread out right around. So Gerald Fourie, let's have a look from upstairs. There's Gerald Fourie. That's a kind of a lone drive for Gerald, because all the way back to there, that is Johan Fourie. And then all the way back to there is the Stephen McCarthy Luke Lucchese battle. Luke Lucchese being the green one, Stephen McCarthy just in front of him. And then the man directly behind that is in fact Willem Botha. That you see him in the apex of the corner, and then the double battle going on behind that. That's Graham Stephen from Atinagel.
There's a lovely fighter for P8, the Sander Bakari fight. He's got Lazarus and Teens in there with him, and that is on board. That's the front window camera of Atinagel, as he's 5/10 of a second behind the Porsche of Graham Stephen. Just ahead of them you see the Aston Martin of Willem Botha. There they come through. There's Bakari. There is Lazarus, and right behind him now, 3/10 of a second, is the Porsche of Willem Pina.
Yep, Robbie Teens in
Sorry,
there behind.
Robbie Teens.
Yeah, behind Herman Lazarus. That's 0.2 of a second, and he's closed up pretty decently as Robbie Teens. Let's have a look at the last lap times that they actually put up, seeing they've just completed a lap, and that's why he's so much closer. Robbie Teens, a 136.292, a 138.3 by Herman, a 37.4, hence Sandro being caught by Herman, Robbie catching up onto the back of Herman. Nothing much between them, and I think the pressure's on for Sandro Bakari to hold on to that position. Closing up heavily under the brakes and just missing out on the back end of the 17 car. That's pretty decent. Let's go back to Willem Botha as he finds himself in the top 5 and just behind Stephen McCarthy.
Yeah, it looks like Gerald Fourie is going to put a lap there on, I think it's Peter Hubert, if I'm not mistaken. But we go back to this fight here, and here comes Botha. Willem Botha's catching up to Stephen McCarthy. Stephen McCarthy hasn't been so high up in a long time, and he sits there in that 4th position trying to keep Botha out. There's a 10th of a second between them. That's nothing. You can cover them with a handkerchief, that's for sure. And then 2.6 seconds behind the McCarthy-Botha combination is Graham Stephen, as Willem Botha has a look. Willem Botha and the Aston Martin has a look at the McLaren of Stephen McCarthy. Down the home straight they go into the right-hander, turn 1, and up on the inside and into P4 goes Willem Botha just before they enter the southern loop.
Well, lying 3rd overall in the championship on 327 as opposed to Francois Hubert on 329. That's not out there. That's exactly what he needs to do. Johan Fourie, that leads them out on the championship log. He'll be quite safe where he is. Francois Hubert, that's not there. That's going to cost him pretty badly, because Willem Botha, that's the man that we're looking at there now. That's Willem Botha. He's lying at 327 points, so that'll move him up to 2nd.
Well, it's lap 12 of 12. I see the white flag is out. So this then should be the final lap for Gerald Fourie.
That's a bit strange.
As he will make his way towards the checkered flag. I think it's probably 25 minutes or 12 laps, whichever comes first.
That is quite a possibility, so well spotted there. We don't want to get caught completely unawares with that one. So let's see, as he comes through across the line, does he get, in fact, the checkered flag? Yes, he does. Well, there we go. So 12 laps was the maximum. Johan Fourie, the next man across the line. Well spotted there by the man from the United States, Gavin Fleming. Luc Lekesi comes around the final corner, turn 11 as it's officially known. And Luc Lekesi picks up a 3rd position. Behind him will be Willem Botha. Stephen McCarthy, pretty tough to that one, within 7/10 of a second. Graham Stephen, the next man to come through. He held out Atinagel all the way to the line with Sandro Bakari and Herman Lazarus, and then also Robbie Teens right in there as well. Willem Pina comes across the line, and he rounds out the top 11.
Yeah, nearly 10 seconds behind him is the Batmobile of Andre Steenkamp. Andre will finish in 12th position, and he'll finish 2.5 seconds ahead of Leonardo Bakari. As he crosses the line, Ian Riddle also finishes his race. Peter van der Spey, we're waiting for Captain Pete to come down towards us. He sits out there in 15th position, 19 seconds behind Ian Riddle. And he is the last man on the lead lap, is Peter van der Spey.
Interesting stuff, I tell you what. I don't know where Peter got that paint job from. That really didn't look too great to me. So the grid for race number 2, there we have it. As they completed, Gerald Fourie from Johan Fourie, Luc Lekesi, Willem Botha and Stephen McCarthy rounds out the top 5.
Graham Stephen, that rounds off the first three rows. Row 4, Ati Nagel and Sander Bakari, Herman Lazarus and Robert Teens. Row 5, Willem Pina and Andre Steenkamp. Row 6.
Yep, that's the front couple. And then we move along to Leonardo Bakari, Ian Riddle, Peter van der Spey, and then Pieter Hubert with Colin Plitt and Timothy Stanton, and then Jan Spammers. Now, according to what I can see, once again, Jan Spammers has not been able to get the car onto the grid.
Yeah, 19. We might only have 18 of them out there. Yep, I don't see Jan Spammers. He hasn't made it out there. So, this is the second one. I presume either 12 laps or 25 minutes, whichever comes first. And it's a Mercedes-Benz AMG front row of Johan Fourie and Gerald Fourie, the two of them. And then watch out for Luc Lucchesi and the Lone Soul Aston Martin of Willem Botha.
Well, problems for Willem Pina. He's jumped to the pits. Now, I hope that doesn't mean that his electricity has failed him, because he's all of a sudden jumped to the pits, because that's not the norm. And Jan Spammers, as you can see, the light grey colour alongside his name, that means he hasn't linked in either.
No, Willem Pina, to my knowledge, he's in the UK. So I don't think he should have a electricity problem.
Well, let's hope for the best that he can somehow get out onto the circuit, but definitely at this stage it's not looking good for him, because it still remains in light grey as opposed to the white colour. And well, look at that, there we go, Gerald Fourie and Johan Fourie on the front row of the grid. Pity that we don't have the likes of Francois Hubert out there, but one of those things. And Luc Lucchesi now starting from that fourth position. That's going to be quite a mountain to climb for the likes of Graham Stevens, Stephen McCarthy, Sandra Bakari, Ati Nagel. I think they're going to battle a bit to break into that front four, because let's be honest, that is one hell of a quick two front rows of the grid.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Let's see where they're going to now. I think they're going into Siberia. Yes, they are. That's a left-hander. That's turn 5, Siberia. Working their way now to turn 6. Then into turn 7. That's called Hayshed. That is Hayshed you see there in front of you. And then work their way up. That slight right-hander towards a left-hander. That uphill left-hander you see there, and that is known as Lucky Heights.
Lots of runoff area all over, and very few people have actually got as far as getting to the tyre wall. So we haven't really had hardly anybody that has ended up going into the pit lane to try and recover damage on their vehicle. Willem Pina and Jan Spammers do not look like they're going to be able to make it to the start line. And as we look back, look at that. That is from Luc Lucchesi's car. You'll see they're all pretty much lined up in there behind him as they work their way towards the end of the lap, and just about ready to get going.
Right, there's the pit lane you see on your right-hand side. Their left-hand side. Oh, look at Luc Lucchesi saying, Johan Fourie, I'm here, son. Porsche Service Zentrum Center. Mooipath, whatever. Hope I got that right. We go green here once again at Phillip Island in Melbourne, Australia. Into that right-hander they'll go now, which will take them down into turn 2. That will be the southern loop, and we ride aboard here with Gerald Fourie looking back at the rest of the field. Going through turn number 1. Now they'll go through the gearbox into turn number 2, southern loop. Using that rumble strip and more is Gerald Fourie. From Johan Fourie in that second position, followed there by Luc Lucchesi. Graham Stephen is a man on the move. He's got his nose ahead there of Willem Botha, followed by Robbie Teens and Sandra Bakari.
Well, Timothy Stanton coming off the back end of the pack. That's the opposite look to looking back from Gerald Fourie in there behind, ahead of Timothy Stanton. That is Colin Plitt just ahead of that. Oh, very late on the brakes, and it looks like Herman Lazarus has decided to test how much grip there is on the grass.
Not where you want to go. Herman all the way down in P17 right now, just ahead of Willem Pina. So Timothy Stanton is the man you saw out there in P16. As we go back to the man in that second position, that is Johan Fourie. He's been mugged here by Luc Lucchesi. Willem Botha's all over the back there of Graham Stephen, as he says, come on Graham, get a move on. Then we see, oh, somebody's gone. Somebody is gone packing. That is Ian Riddle. Ian Riddle dropping all the way down the leaderboard.
Yep, that didn't work out very well for Ian Riddle whatsoever, and that's going to cost him pretty dearly as going off track. That far off track is actually very, very difficult. Let's see what it looked like from inside Ian Riddle's car. Just touched the grass, turns itself around. Oh, he hammered the curbstones, at a little nibble at the tire wall. And look, when you turn it around there, you can see the skid marks, how he went through. That's the recovering hammer. Lazarus, that's just gone through. That means he's going to recover the tail end of the circuit.
So Riddle will be all the way at the back. As a matter of fact, he's escaped to the pit area. So let's have a look and see. There goes Graham Stephen. Here comes Sander Bakari and Stephen McCarthy. The two of them are side by side, and right behind them is Atinachel as they go into that right-hander. Oh, is that Teens that's gone wide? Yes, it's Robbie Teens that's gone wide into that left-hander that's working their way through MG corner.
Dude, he went for the dive and just didn't have enough retardation to be able to make it a turn around. Now he very gingerly comes back towards the circuit to ensure that he doesn't mess up anybody else's race, which is very nice of him. Ian Riddle, after that incident he's gone into the pits, and Willem Botha is in fact, cloud of smoke, so there must have been quite a bit of damage on that motor car. He's on his way out. But the man that's doing it all right today, it's not in fact Johan Fourie, it is in fact Gerald Fourie with that battle going on directly behind him.
And it's a hell of a fight between Johan Fourie and Luke Lucchesi. There's a tenth of a second between the two of them as they make their way down the home straight, down the main straight. Lucchesi for Pantera Racing has got the inside line there on Johan Fourie. Will Johan Fourie let him go? Yes, he lets him go. Now will Johan dive up onto the inside? No, he cannot. The line has been covered there by Luke Lucchesi through the southern loop. The two of them go, and they are having a hell of a fight, which means that there is nearly 2 seconds between the two of them and race leader Gerald Fourie.
Pity you're being behind Stephen McCarthy, as looks like something just went there with Leonardo Bakari. We'll see if we can pick up that one. The number 13 out there on circuit. Yep, he's dropping down. That is a Robbie Teens. So Robbie Teens, yep, we picked it up correctly. That's Robbie Teens that went off track. Let's have a look from inside the motor car. Just not enough rotation on that car. And now he's looking to try and keep it in the right direction. Yep, he decides not to go back to the grass, as Frankie said earlier on. Maybe just get out of the sand and onto the grass. But he gets that one back together pretty neatly and carries on from there.
Right, we are on lap 3 of 12 or 25 minutes, whatever comes first. There is Peter Hubert. He's crowding the back end of McCarthy. That is having a heck of a fight there. The McLarens all over each other. It's Hubert that is there with McCarthy. Graham Stephen has dropped down to P6. Graham Stephen is dropping down the leaderboard. He finds himself now in 8th position and going further and further down.
Oh, just a little bit too much loud pedal and off onto the sidewalk, and gets that one back onto the circuit again. Phillip Botha had a semi-similar incident a couple of seconds ago. Also working his way, not rotating the car enough. You see, he straightens it out very, very neatly just before he went off the circuit, and luckily for him that sorted it out, that he could not lose too much time. Pity Hubert just 1.6 behind Atinachel. But the Battle Royal, Johan Fourie and Luke Lucchesi, they're busy swapping positions again.
They are chopping and changing positions, and this is allowing Fourie to disappear down the road. Lucchesi is in second, 0.5 of a second ahead there of Johan Fourie, and there is nothing between them. And they have put a lap there on Andre Steenkamp. I see he's in the Batmobile. He sits all the way down in 16th position. So the two of them have lapped Steenkamp. That's Steenkamp. That's the last man you see there in your screen, but he's one lap down. Then there's a fight here for P8. They are fighting for P8. Peter van der Spey, Timothy Stanton, and Willem Pinaar. They are fighting for Leonardo Bakari's 8th position.
Timothy Stanton rounding out the top 10. Peter van der Spey, having come off the back of the pack's done actually very well, all the way up into 9th position. So that's looking pretty strong for him. I think you'll fancy maybe taking that lawnmower coloured vehicle. I've never seen such an ugly looking colour for a Porsche. I'm sorry, Peter, but it's not a great looking motor car, that. And yeah, Peter van der Spey inside of the top 10 and all over the back there of Leonardo Beccari. See, Leonardo Beccari starting to move from side to side to try and break the toe, but Timothy Stanton picking up the toe and having a look on that outside line.
Yeah, but Van der Spey is covering that line. Here comes Timothy Stanton. He's a lot quicker. He's got the inside line, but it's been covered there by Van der Spey. As we have a look here at Stanton, and that's the outside view of it. You just saw the inside view from Stanton's car on Van der Spey. Now you see from one of the trackside cameras there, right on the back of Van der Spey, is Stanton. It's the Porsche versus the Mercedes-Benz. Right behind them, a second, now under a second, is the Porsche of Willem Pina. And they are fighting each other still for Beccari's 8th position.
Atinagel slowly but surely moving onto the back end there of Sandro Beccari. He's 0.3 of a second out, and Sandro Beccari, well, Sandro's got nothing to really go for in front of him, because it's 7 seconds between Sandro Beccari and the next man in front of him, which is the top 3 contenders, Gerald Fourie, Luc Lucchesi and Johan Fourie. So Sandro Beccari pretty much thinking now, look, I've gone as far forward as what I can go. Let's make sure that I don't go backwards at all. And I think Sandro Beccari will be pretty chuffed where he is if he can hold on to that position. But there's his problem, and that problem is called Atinagel.
Yeah, and only 1.4 seconds behind them is Peter Hubert. But look at that fight for second. Fourie is only 0.6 of a second behind Luc Lucchesi. You'll go have a look at that one now as we ride aboard here with Sandro Beccari. And he is looking back at Atinagel. There's only 0.3 of a second between the two of them. And closing up on them is the other McLaren of Peter Hubert.
Peter van der Spey's got a problem. He's got a Mercedes badge on the front, and that's Timothy Stanton in the Red Bull colours. So, yeah, it's a lovely looking motor car. That lovely colour scheme on that motor car. And I think Peter van der Spey is going to be really wake up right now.
Now, but just ahead of Van der Spey is Beccari. There we go. So even though Stanton is attacking Van der Spey is attacking Beccari. And as a matter of fact, Timothy Stanton himself is being attacked there by Willem Pina.
Well, that's what it looks like if you look to see what's happening in front of you. If you look to see what's happening behind you, it's just as close.
Yeah, that's a very good one that we're looking at right now. That's a fight for that man's 8th position. And Wolf van der Spey have a lunge at the McLaren there of Beccari. He's right there with him. He cannot afford to make a mistake, because if he makes a mistake, that Red Bull... Oh, there's contact between Van der Spey and Beccari. And Van der Spey came off worse for wear in that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, just a little bit too close. There was Peter van der Spey from inside the cockpit in that 4th gear. Climbs on the brakes, goes down to 3rd, goes down to 2nd, trying to retard that car as quick as possible, but unfortunately not being able to slow it down quick enough. And well, luckily he had a bit of space behind him to be able to go on from there. So 7 laps down, and let's look at that battle there that Atinagel is still in. Atinagel with Sandro Beccari in front of him, and Peter Hubert all over his back bumper. Peter Hubert up 10 positions.
Yeah, well, have a look at that. Well, this is the fight for P4. They are fighting for Beccari's 4th position, because he's 9 seconds behind that other war between Lucchesi and Fourie. And Atinagel and the Peter Hubert, the man you ride on board with. That's the 3 of them you see in view. That is Peter Hubert. Just ahead of him is Atinagel. And then it is a lovely, lovely fight there you see. And Hubert is getting closer and closer there to Nagel.
Yep, no doubt about it that at this stage of the fight, with 10 minutes 53 gone, we're on lap number 7. Frankie, I think you said you think it's capped to 12 laps?
Well, it was the other one, the checkered flag. Gavin picked it up. The checkered flag came out, or the white flag came out at the beginning of the 12th lap. So I presume it's
Ooh.
25 or 12, and this is not what Peter Hubert needs right now.
Oh, up against the wall. Let's hope there's not too much damage on that motor car. Remember, there's no pit stops at all. And he brings it under the Melbourne, Australia bridge. And back onto the circuit he goes. And that's cost him because he's dropped down. Well, Leonardo Bakari has had that off circuit. And I do believe that Bakari is... there we go. That's what it looks like. Trying to get it back onto the circuit again. Cars just coming through one after the other. Got to be very careful to come back on circuit. And eventually she says, okay, let's just slow this thing right down, get it into a straight line and get going from there. But don't ever forget about this man up front. It's normally Johan Fourie. Today, the man on the move, Gerald Fourie, doing it all right.
But that fight's still going on behind him, and that's the fight there between Luke Lucchesi and Johan Fourie as we have a look at that AMG Mercedes go through of Gerald Fourie. Here comes Pantera Racing's Luke Lucchesi in that second position, and right behind him is Johan Fourie. Believe it or not, Willem Botha has been lapped by them. He's all the way down in P15 is Willem Botha, and this is Sandro Bakari that you see there in that fourth position, and he's been crowded there by Atti Nagel.
Yep, Atti once again having a brilliant race out there is Atti Nagel. The two of them have got a fair gap between themselves and Stephen McCarthy. There comes Stephen McCarthy, and a little bit further back than that is in fact a Peter Hubert. Now Peter Hubert almost 7 seconds behind them. Timothy Stanton closing down pretty quickly.
Yeah, he's just over a second behind him, and then P9 is Willem Pina, and he's been kept honest there by Herman Lazarus. The other two of them come, the Porsche and the McLaren. The cheapercars.co.za versus the Castrol car, and 1.5 seconds behind the two of them. In P11 is that man you see there, Robbie Teams.
A nice variety of GT4s out there, Frankie.
Yes, it's basically Mercedes-Benz and McLarens and Porsches and one Aston Martin.
Yep, Timothy Stanton still on the move at this stage of the fight. Timothy Stanton in there behind Peter Hubert. Peter Hubert, that's lying fourth overall in the championship, just behind Willem Botha, 17 points behind Willem Botha. But Graham Stephen is not that far behind Peter Hubert. He's on 299, so 11 points between himself and Graham Stephen. But what's happened now for Graham Stephen is a big problem because he's out of it completely. So him closing up on the back of Peter Hubert is not going to happen. The problem for Graham Stephen, that is fifth overall in the championship on the second last race of the season, is that Luke Lucchesi is only 3 points behind Graham Stephen. And Luke Lucchesi, he looks something like that. He's not the cheese man today. As FC likes to say, when he does bad, he says he's the cheese man. When he does well, he says, Mr. Luke Lucchesi.
Well, I suppose you can call him Mr. Luke Lucchesi in this one because he is just under a second ahead of Johan Fourie. Fourie is trying to fight back, but there is a little fight here for P7 between Peter Hubert and Timothy Stanton. We'll have a look at that one. As Atti Nagel as well. Yeah, that's a fight for fourth position. Sandro Bakari is in that fourth position, and 4/10 of a second behind him is Atti Nagel, and the car you see ahead of them, that is Willem Botha, but he is all the way down in P16 and one lap down.
Yeah, in fact, 12 positions down for that man. So Willem Botha not having a lot of fun. I think the car directly in front of that looks to me to be Andre Steenkamp. And looks like he's going to be the next man to go a lap down as well at the pace these guys are going. We've got 9.5 minutes left, or another 2 laps to go.
Well, let's have a look and see. And there isn't really much happening except that fight for fourth position, which is the one that we're on right now, with a back marker in there, and that is Atti Nagel. And he has 4/10 behind Bakari. The back marker just moves out the way and allows them through.
That's about as close as you can go. We've seen how many people put a wheel onto the dirt over there. He's pushing very hard. Atti Nagel wants this one. He's all over the back of Sandro Bakari. Can he make this one stick? and he's going to have a look. Can he get it up on the inside line? No. Ooh, I hope they don't make contact. That must have been very, very close. Sandra Bakari says, you're going to go past. That's fine. Go around the outside.
Well, was going to cover that race line going into turn number 1, that's for sure. In that lovely fight between Bakari and Nagel through turn 2, the southern loop they come right now. The back markers ahead of those 3 cars you see over there will make it those 2 cars. We are on lap 11 at this point in time as Bakari and Nagel work their way through, and ahead of them is the back marker Willem Botha, and behind them is the back marker Andre Steenkamp.
Well, just a little bit further back is, still slightly further forward, in fact, Robbie Teens, the Bolt Man, on his way down to Cape Town for the 9-hour at Killarney International Raceway. That'll be on Friday and Saturday. A lot of these guys that you see here will be, in fact, taking part in that specific motor race as Robbie Teens and Herman Lazarus battle it out in close contingency.
Oh, that's Pinar, Lazarus and Teens. That's the 3 cars you see on your screen going under that bridge there. And Willem Pinar, 0.3 of a second ahead of Herman Lazarus, who's 0.7 of a second ahead of Robbie Teens. This is a replay of Ati Nagel. Oh, is that
Sandro Bakari?
Yeah, that just got sent all the way down. Is Bakari.
As you said, Frankie, and well spotted by Gavin. That's lap number 12, and that is the white flag that's come out. So let's honor this man up front, Gerald Fourie.
Yeah, Gerald Fourie is 3.3 seconds ahead of Luc Lucchesi, who is now 1.8 seconds ahead of Johan Fourie. So this is the flag lap. The white flag has come out for the last lap. 2 out of 2 it will be for Gerald Fourie.
Stephen McCarthy having a last gasp effort there to try and get past Sandro Bakari as well. We saw Sandro Bakari being passed by Ati Nagel as he rattled enough that Stephen McCarthy can work him over as well. Well, I think that Sandro is going to hold on to that position. I think it's not all over yet. You see that number 1 that's running around on the circuit at the top end of your track map. That in fact is a Gerald Fourie. The 2 is Luc Lucchesi. The 3 is Johan Fourie. Then the 14 cars, Willem Botha, that's in between them, and then going back to the 4th position of Ati Nagel.
Well, the leader's making his way out of turn 11 right now towards a checkered flag. That's coming out of turn 11. There is the pit lane on his left-hand side, and it is a double victory for Gerald Fourie that wins the second heat as well. 2.9 seconds ahead of Luc Lucchesi, that's just crossed the line. 2.8 seconds ahead of Johan Fourie in that 3rd position.
Yep, Ati Nagel once again getting himself a decent position. 253.6 position overall on the log for the season. Sandro Bakari right in there behind them, and then there comes Stephen McCarthy through as well. There comes Timothy Stanton. He will be semi-happy with that one. Peter Bear comes flying past, and there comes through Willem Pinar, and look at that battle behind them. As quick as you can click from one to the other, they come across the line. Leonardo Bakari is just a little bit further back, and he makes his way through the last corner. The number 12 with the green around it, there he goes across the line. That's Leonardo Bakari. And then Peter van der Spey, that came off the tail end of the field, the last man to come through.
Only 13 cars on the lead lap as Van der Spey finishes his race. Well, it's a double victory for Gerald Fourie. We don't see Gerald Fourie too often doing the Western Province iRacing Sports and GT Master Series. And the fact that we've seen him here, of course, those of you who don't know, he's the dad of Leighton Fourie. And because we don't see him that often, he gets my driver of the day.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Gerald Fourie, brilliant stuff. Not only can he take his son to National Polo Cup Championship titles and take him overseas to go and race as well. He's also a very avid racer in his own right in iRacing, and Gerald Fourie Yes, driver of the day, agree on that. A nice fight back there by Luke Lekezi, trying to find his way into the top five. And yes, I think he's done exactly that, as he will have jumped Graham Stephen and probably be very close to Peter Hubert after tonight's races. Johan Fourie, there and thereabouts. No real mistakes or anything from Johan Fourie. Just the pace at the front was pretty quick for him.
Yeah, well, that's your top three. Atinagel finishes in P4. Sander Bakari and Stephen McCarthy finish in P5 and 6. Followed there by Stanton, Peter Hubert, Willem Pina, and Herman Lazarus rounds off your top 10.
Yep, Robbie Teens from the United Bakari, Peter van der Speyk coming off the back of the pack up to that 13th. Colin Plitt, Willem Botha. Oh, didn't work out for Willem today whatsoever.
No.
Andre Steenkamp, Ian Riddle having that big off, and unfortunately losing out there was Graham Stephen. That was in the top five, but after today's race, I think he's definitely, well, today's two races, I think he's definitely going to be out of that one. Let's have a look at the results from heat number one. Just going back to that, as you said, Frankie, a double header. Gerald Fourie.
Yeah, double victory for Gerald. I feel sorry for Willem Botha. He got a fourth in race one, and the second one he was one lap down. So that would be my bad luck for Botha after doing so well in the opening heat and then having it all go wrong in the second one.
So that wraps it up for today. That was your heat number one results. There's your heat number two results. So Frankie, from here on out, it's going to be a quiet Thursday. Then it's going to be crazy Friday and a massive Saturday down at Killarney International Raceway.
Yes, it's the Cape Festival of Racing. We've got GT cars that will be doing 1 hour on Friday. They'll be doing an hour on Saturday as well. And then at 12:15, all the way through to 9:15, will be the 9-hour, the SA Endurance Series 9-hour. A few of them will only be doing 1 hour, then they pull off, and then the rest continue for the other 8 hours. And that's going to be some good stuff. And as a backup, we'll have 2 motorcycle races on the Friday and 2 on the Saturday as well.
So, in closing, Eugene Manouk, I see on the iRacing Masters Series group, he says, I could have raced, but my power is still not on. And then Graham Stevens saying load shedding got the better of me. So, unfortunately, yet another person that I almost said, Escom has taken a knock and made Graham Stephen 10 laps plus down at the bottom end of the field. From the Second Gear Production Studios here in the friendly city of Cape Town in Velgelegen, very nice to have had you with us this evening, and look forward to seeing you at a racetrack soon. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the week, the weekend. Remember, the big one is at Killarney. And if you find yourself in the Cape Town Boerland area, there's also oval track racing in Worcester. Good night. Goodbye.